Call the meeting to order. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. This is meeting number 7 of the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today we are studying the Supplementary Estimates B for 2013-2014 as they pertain to Employment and Social Development Canada. For the first hour today, we have the Honourable Jason Kenney, Minister of Employment and Social Development, with us, along with Minister Kenney are Ian Shugart, the Deputy Minister, Karen Jackson, the Senior Associate Deputy Minister, Employment and Social Development, Chief Operating Officer for Service Canada. We have Mr. Alain Seguin, Chief Financial Officer, and from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, we have Stephen Manil, Vice President, Policy Research and Planning. On behalf of the committee, we'd like to thank you, Minister Kenney, for taking the time to be with us today. I know you have some opening remarks prepared, so I'll turn the floor over to you for your presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and congratulations on your election. I know you've served on this committee for many years, and I'm glad to see that it's in such good hands. And thank you, colleagues, for the opportunity for the first time to appear before you as Minister of Employment and Social Development Canada. And Minister for Multiculturalism, but really in the former capacity, obviously. I'll be, first of all, just giving you an overview of the Supplementary Estimates B, that is the ostensible agenda item here, and then making some general remarks about the emphasis that I'm placing on ensuring that we can connect Canadians with the jobs of the future. Mais tout d'abord, je dois dire, Monsieur le Président, j'espère que les membres...
But first of all, Mr. Chairman, I hope that the members of the committee will be a little patient with me because I'm somewhat new in this mandate in the department. It's a very large, complex department. In terms of the budget, is the largest of the federal government, a budget of some $115 billion, some 40% of government expenditures, and as you know, with more than 23,000 employees. It affects more Canadians than any other department.
In the various programs administered through ESDC, and so I'm on a very steep learning curve. I hope you'll be somewhat patient with me today. I will probably be more dependent on good answers and informative answers from my extremely competent officials than I was after 5 years at immigration. So with that in mind, let me say that I'm pleased to appear before you on Supplementary Estimates B. We are requesting 14, I'm just going to break down the various, altogether we're requesting $64 million in these supplementary estimates, and I'll break down each of the major line items. First of all, under the Enabling Accessibility Fund, we're requesting $14.8 million to support this fund, which is about the construction and renovations to improve physical accessibility for persons with disabilities. The funding in these supplementary estimates would provide $1.16 million to administer the program and $13.65 million to fund small and mid-sized projects. ESDC, then we have a request for $13.3 million under the Homelessness Partnering Strategy. La stratégie de partenariat de lutte contre l'itinérance aide.
The homelessness partnering strategy helps homeless people off the streets and into homes. The funds that are requested are being reprofiled from homelessness partnership strategy allocations in 2012-13 that were unspent.
Anticipated for a number of reasons. Firstly, the funds are distributed according to priorities set by local communities, and the partnership approach requires consultation to establish priorities and align with the partners, and that takes time. Some capital projects were delayed as a result of these consultations and of zoning and environmental assessment processes. Thirdly, short-term impacts of the transition to a more streamlined delivery model resulted in project delays for some of the communities. Next, I'm requesting $11.9 million, Chairman, to support the First Nations Jobs Fund, which is a significant commitment flowing from this year's Economic Action Plan to support the job training needs of on-reserve First Nations income assistance recipients who are 18 to 24 years of age and living in communities that participate in the program. These expenditures will help to provide personalized support for Aboriginal youth as they secure the job and skills training that will help them get available jobs. Next, notre ministère demande 10.
Our department is seeking $10 million to fund new internships for recent post-secondary graduates through the Career Focus program. Budget 2013 announced $70 million over 3 years to support more than 5,000 paid internships for recent post-secondary graduates. In year one, ESDC is seeking $10 million, with $30 million being spent in years 2 and 3. This funding will be used to provide wage subsidies to employers to give post-secondary graduates career-related work experiences to facilitate their transition to the labour market.
We are requesting $8 million to increase Aboriginal participation in the Canadian labour market through the Skills and Partnership Fund, which is a demand-driven program which leverages partnerships from the private sector, provincial and territorial governments, learning institutions, and Aboriginal organizations. Given the high volume of project proposals that we had to look at in the last fiscal year, $20.6 million went unspent. And so we're now seeking to reprofile $8 million of that to the current fiscal year and $12.6 million to the next fiscal year. Next, Chairman, in Budget 2012, the government introduced the voluntary deferral of old age security pensions. This allows seniors the flexibility to defer receipt of the OAS basic pension up to the age of 70 in exchange for an actuarially adjusted pension. ESDC is requesting $3.1 million in these supplementary estimates to implement the program. And as well, $500,000 to create a Canadian Employer Disability Forum, which is one of the recommendations that came out of the panel on labour market opportunities for persons with disabilities. And I think the committee studied that issue and is familiar with the report. The ministry has found $1.3 million in offsets through the Canada Student Loan Program and by implementing measures to reduce travel costs, and that's noted in the estimates. And we are including a number of statutory appropriations in the supplementary estimates, such as the $3 million announced in the budget to the Canadian National Institute for the Blind to help improve their library services. The supplementary estimates also include $600,000 cost adjustment related to employee benefits plan, the majority of which is the result of the deferral of the OAS pension. $2,000 is consequent to the creation of the Office of the Minister of State for Social Development. And finally, we will receive $500,000 in transfers from Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development to deliver youth programming with the Katavik Regional Government. The funds requested above through the supplementary estimates B will provide ESDC with the tools it needs in the coming year. Chairman, do I have any time left in my normal set aside? How much?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Perhaps I could just, j'aimerais mettre l'accent sur un enjeu.
We'd just like to stress an issue that bothers me quite a bit. That is the paradox of too many Canadians who are jobless and the growing number of jobs seeking workers. This is a paradox.
The aggregate labour market information that we see from StatsCan suggests that there is not a grave or identifiable labour or skills shortage, and yet every single employer with whom I meet, and many unions tell me, particularly in the construction trades, for example, that they are facing, they're currently experiencing very significant labour and skill shortages. This is an issue that I've taken up with my provincial counterparts. I hope in my capacity to lead something of an informed national conversation on how we can do a better job, not just the federal government, but also provinces, educators, employers, and unions, all of us together, in ensuring that Canadians have the skills necessary for the labour market and the economy of the future. It's unacceptable that we should see 13% youth unemployment, 14% unemployment amongst recent immigrants, ridiculous levels of unemployment amongst Aboriginal Canadians in the labour force, precisely when we see employers complaining persistently about labour and skills shortages. I don't have time, obviously, to go into my detailed thoughts about some of the remedies, but I want to invite members of the committee to propose what they think are solutions, how we can increase labour force participation, mobility, interprovincial labour mobility, mutual recognition of credentials for professions and trades, accelerated foreign credential recognition for foreign trained professionals, how we can perhaps have a stronger partnership with the provinces in the large transfers we give them through the Canada Social Transfer for post-secondary education to ensure those dollars are getting maximum bang for the taxpayer's buck in preparing people for jobs, how we can ensure that ideas like the Canada Job Grant actually prepare people for real jobs and not fictitious ones, real ones in the labour market through an employer-led program, how we can increase private sector investment in skills development and job training. And I think we need to be imaginative. I think we need to look beyond Canada to some other countries that perhaps have stronger models of education and skills development for the labour market. So just wanted to touch on that as a key priority for me, Chairman, and I look forward to all of your questions. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now, having checked with our standing orders and our routine orders, the first rounds when we have two panels are 5 minutes. That was what we had decided when we started, so I just wanted to make both sides of the table aware that all rounds will be 5 minutes. So we'll start off with Madam Sims for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I want to first of all say thank you to the Minister for making a time available to come and meet with us today. And as time is limited, Minister, I'm going to get right to the chase, so to speak. One of the defences against the abundance of criticism that has come towards the proposed Canada Job Grant is that the LMA system is not working. And you've kind of alluded to that right now as well. But in a leaked internal document from HRSDC, which is now ESDC, acronyms, we have to learn them, which collated all of the provincial data, it was shown that 86% of those involved in LMA training had a job within 2 years. Those numbers are from the departmental data. So with 86% success rate, I'm just wondering what kind of a data you are using to say that it's not working. And so that's my first question, and we're very short for time, so please keep it.
I'll be brief. Chairman, first of all, those evaluations are interesting but not comprehensive. They don't test, for example, a separate group that didn't go through the training to see what percentage of them ended up in the labour market. What we do know is that on a macro level, we are not getting the job done as governments. We're spending billions, more than virtually any other developed country, on skills development and job training, and yet unacceptable high levels of unemployment in various areas of our population, as I've identified, and a growing number of employers who are reporting skill and labour shortages. And so the idea here is I think, it's basically common sense. It's employers, not government programs, that create jobs. And if the employers identify people with the aptitude to work, specific incremental training programs from which they can benefit with a guaranteed job at the end of it, we are certain that will produce better results. Finally, let me say, I have not categorized the LMA project as a failure. I've said that I think there are some good projects that we're funding through the provinces and some that have less impressive results. And I think it's a mixed bag.
Minister, as the provinces seem to think that the LMA system works, and there seems to be a lot of unanimity amongst our provinces, I would say very rare, have you considered allocating new money to the Canada Job Grant, letting the other program go, or piloting a smaller version with new money first to see if this new approach is going to work?
It's a reasonable question. And in part, I would say yes, because in fact, the proposal for the job grant would have it implemented through increments, starting with only a 15% allocation of the current LMA transfer to the provinces, and then ramping up to eventually 60%, which means the provinces would, after full implementation, maintain control over $200 million to spend on what they consider priority programs. So in the first year, they would have 85% of their current funding to spend on their priority programs. So if you want to call that a pilot approach, it's a very gradual approach, and we can monitor results as we go. Let me say I've expressed to the provinces an attitude of flexibility, met with them 3 weeks ago. We'll be meeting with provincial colleagues again in 10 days, and look forward to their kind of counter-proposal. So just I want to say simply, if they have ideas about how we can do this better, we're all ears.
Minister, my next question is to do with the housing funding, and you mentioned that as well. This was the money that was not spent on the homelessness partnering strategy, $16 million of it. So what kind of systems have you put in place to prevent the same kind of delays going forward, so that funding allocated to help the most vulnerable Canadians can get out of the door in a timely manner?
I don't think we need systems in place now, because we had to do the consultations, and that does take time. You would criticize if we didn't do the consultations, or if we did them in a rush. So we've got that information back from the local community partners, and we've reprofiled the money into the next 2 fiscal years, and we're ready to roll. Would anyone like to add to that, Ian?
I would only add, Minister, that and Chair, that some of the changes involved the community entity model, shifting the program development through them. That did result in some of the early delays as the communities shifted to that model. That is now done, and we anticipate that there will be a much more rapid flow, that having been behind us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to Mr. Armstrong.
Mr. Chair, Minister, I want to thank you and your officials for being here today, taking the time out of your busy schedule. You know, being an Atlantic Canadian, our government has made some changes connecting Canadians with available jobs in the last couple of years, and we have heard some opposition protests towards this, as well as some different voices coming from the provinces. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about employment insurance, the changes we've made, and the results you've seen so far.
Sure. There have been a number of changes, as you know, Mr. Chairman. But the one that's received the most attention is connecting Canadians with available jobs, which was essentially a clarification of the long-standing rules implicit in the employment insurance system that applicants for EI are required to actively seek and accept available work at their skill level in their local area. We gave a little more definition to what acceptable work is and what the local area is defined as, always to be applied with flexibility by our officials. But basically, Chairman, the reason we implemented these clarified guidelines is because we saw the really strange paradox of a growing number of employers, even in regions of very high unemployment, with large numbers of habitual EI recipients, who were filing labour market opinions to bring in workers from abroad. And it just made, frankly, no sense to me at all that someone from Thailand or the Philippines or Russia would be willing to get on a plane and fly across the world to go to a community to do a job where people who have done precisely that job are down the street or in the next village collecting employment insurance. So EI is supposed to be there, and it will be there, for folks who lose work through no fault of their own and for whom no relevant work is available in their local area. Now, there's been a lot of fear-mongering on these changes, and I can understand. There's a lot of anxiety, and understandable anxiety. Whenever there's change, people are going to be anxious, especially when it relates to their income security. I get that 100%. And we could have done a better job, perhaps, of communicating those changes, especially in areas where people are very dependent on EI. Having said that, I really do think some of this was just political fear-mongering. And we had one member of Parliament I mentioned in question period running around northern New Brunswick saying this was the end of EI, the end of seasonal benefits, that these communities would be destroyed, families would go into poverty. Complete, unadulterated balderdash, nonsense, invented from whole cloth, nothing to do with the rules. And when I followed those speeches and rallies and media stories, it's interesting, none of them actually mentioned the specific changes that were made, which were actually just quite modest clarifications of the long-standing rules. And now we have the first 7 months of data in, which indicate that there has been virtually no negative impact on EI applicants as a result of connecting Canadians with available jobs. Just to give you one example, in the province of Quebec, for the first 7 months of this year versus the first 7 months of 2012, we saw an increase of about 6,000, by 6,000, the number of people whose EI applications were not accepted. We looked a little more deeply into the data and found that only 160 of those people, as best we could tell, had their claims refused because they did not comply with the new requirements under connecting Canadians with available jobs, but that about 5,000 of those refused applicants were refused because we discovered they were living outside the country. Now, that's not to say everyone who's refused is clearly way outside the rules, but it is to say that on debates like this, as elected political officials, we should not recklessly frighten people about their income security. And finally, I would like to say, we don't have comprehensive data to draw meaningful conclusions from this, but there's building anecdotal evidence from employers that we achieved the objective. Like I heard from some fish processing plants in the East Coast. I've heard from Bioalimentaire, une société au Québec, de la station de ski de Saint-Bruno.
A corporation in Quebec from the ski station near Saint-Bruno, Quebec, where they have seasonal workers, but because of the changes and what they wanted to know what that means, we seek to make the unemployed be more active, to look for work in their regions, and it seems, to date at least, we have achieved these objectives.
Can you clarify, Minister, really quickly? None of those changes affected the requirements to qualify for the program. Is that accurate?
No, they did not.
Thank you.
Thank you for the shortened answer, Minister. On to Mr. Cuzner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Minister and the officials for being here today. Minister, you know, on the EI stuff, I'm not going there today, but it's incumbent, it's incumbent when politicians get engaged that they tell the truth to the people. And when we see a letter stating EI recipients are receiving payment in 21 days in 80% of the cases, and signed by the minister, and the minister not knowing that notice of non-payment is also part of that measurement, then that gets people upset. So, but this is what I'm starting this off on a good foot, Minister, is that I know you work hard. I know you're a capable guy, and you know, being smart, capable, and committed, knowing your files is a step up. I think you can be a fixer, and I think your offer to work with the committee and those around, I appreciate that at face value, and I thank you for that. Just with the jobs grant, the rationale for the jobs grant, I know the Prime Minister said the biggest challenge our country faces. I know that you're on record. You say those who say there's no skill shortage, they're facing a mismatch with reality. Square the circle with the Don Drummond comments and the TD comments. The study from the TD.
I wish I could. Mr. Cuzner, I thank you for asking that question. That is perhaps the most important question this committee could answer. As I said in my open, look, I've been actually quite nuanced. We politicians don't do nuance very well, let's admit it. At least I don't. But I made an exception in this case to actually be nuanced and say, there's something going on here that I don't fully understand. Because you're absolutely right. The Don Drummonds and the TD reports and the Institute of Research and Public Policy, I could give you a long list. They say, based on the aggregate StatsCan labour market information, that there is not evidence of acute labour shortages now or in the foreseeable future. And yet, Mr. Cuzner, every single employer I meet, from the fish processing plant operators in your area to people in the service industry, the computer gaming industry in Montreal, the IT industry in Toronto, the agricultural operators in the West, the major construction, they all say their #1 challenge is skills shortage. And cumulatively, these aren't, I don't believe those organizations are lying. I don't believe they're making it up.
And I don't either. Would you agree, though, that it's more certain areas of the country in certain sectors?
For sure. Absolutely, is exactly what I've said. Clearly they're more acute.
But, you know, the jobs grant seems to be this broad-based, one-size-fits-all approach to doing that. You know, so, you know, and you've identified that you want to be flexible, but we're not seeing that yet. What we've seen so far is that, you know, you want to continue to, that this is the answer, but it seems like you know, a too broad of an approach to fix certain pockets of areas in certain industries.
Let me clarify, Mr. Chairman. I've never suggested, nor do I believe, that the Canada Job Grant is the solution to the paradox of too many jobs without people and too many people without jobs. I don't believe that for a moment. Let's put this in perspective. The job grant, when fully implemented, we're talking about $300 million out of a $1.6 trillion economy, out of governments that spend cumulatively billions and billions on skills development. So we're talking here, Ms. Sims talked about a pilot. Okay. It's not much bigger than the pilot. It's just one effort to try one different approach, an approach that works in Europe, where the employers select the folks that get the training, where we leverage a larger private sector investment in training, and where there's a job at the end of it.
I'll get time for one more question here, and it's just about the LMAs. And you know, the job grant and the LMA, they're two different beasts. They serve two different purposes. And I see the principles behind the job grant. I think if it was funded separately, I could really buy into that and support that. But taking it from the LMA and asking the provinces, you know, you say you've had some victories, but you're taking 60% of the funding out. Well, you know, and what you're asking to do with the LMA money, it's like asking your car to, you know, do the laundry. I want yours. I want your. You know, you're on record, Minister. You've referred to the LMAs, and you were quoted. I know you know your own words, it turns most people involved into habitual welfare recipients.
No, I didn't say that. I said that many of the programs funded through those dollars by the
well, that's what we have as a quote for you,
No,
Minister.
I did not say it turns them in. I said that that the clients often are habitual welfare recipients, and that's true. Not all of them, but many of them are.
Because there are many success stories, but you know, in the leaked document from your, they have a fairly strong statement here that when they refer to the LMAs as a strong continuing need exists for LMA program and services.
That's the end of the questioning.
But I want to end on the fact that I appreciate your gesture of working together.
Okay, to Monsieur Boulerice for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vous avais...
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll be sharing my time with my colleague, Madame Ruggier. Minister, I just want to go follow up on what Ms. Sims was saying with respect to the homelessness strategy. It's all well and good to consult, but when the projects are slow in coming, it's very difficult. There are projects, we are told, in the field that are not materializing, and that hurts the most vulnerable. This is why we are concerned with the speed of delivery of these programs. Quebec brings in people together, the elected persons and other group representatives, but these programs will end next March 30th. What is happening with the programs that are in Quebec? Will they be extended during the time of negotiation, of discussion? Speaking of Quebec groups, we are very optimistic. We're making progress. We're optimistic there will be an agreement. I don't have a specific date in mind. Can Mr. Manel add something? He's dealing with that. This is the ADM. Yes, there are ongoing discussions with the Government of Quebec at the present time, and we are hoping that everything will be in place to ensure the continuity of the services. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for being present today. My question deals with expenditures that deal with a transfer of some $497,000 to your department from Indian Affairs with respect to the Katimavik program. Can you explain what this means and what programs will they be replacing? I'm just looking, ma'am. Might I ask Monsieur Seguin to answer this?
Ce financement est versé dans le cadre.
This funding is paid under the employment strategy for a young Inuit. That is a complete. Is complementary to the program that is supplied by the Kativik administrative region in terms of skills and development that is intended for Aboriginal persons. The transfer is made annually and has been made since 2005. It deals with the production of reports. So that deals with partnership and skills funds, yes. Exclusively, or, for example, the mandatory work program on reserve? No, exclusively with that. Okay. Do you think that your department will be better suited to deal with this than the original department? Why was it transferred? Mr. Chair? It has become an agreement amongst the clients and the departments to effect the transfer in this way, to bind more closely the delivery of services and the training to the clients. My question is this. Will the money be given to the businesses to train workers, or will it be given to training institutions, for example. What are the concrete targets here? Where are the funds going? It's distributed by the organization itself, the Katavik organization, and it is done with investment agencies and those agencies that provide the training. Okay. Is it then the businesses that will be responsible for affecting and drafting a training program, or will it be rather Katavik that will be responsible for putting training in place? How will it operate? To a very large extent, the businesses, the corporations are involved, but it will be decided by Katavik according to needs and according to job opportunities.
On to the government side, and Mr. Shorey.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister and his officials as well. Well, Minister, one of the reasons I left my lucrative law practice was my concern, or seriously, was my concern about the lack of foreign credential recognition, and you know that this is my passion. Now, I have told this story before, and I'll share once again, that I hear it very often, that maybe the best place to have a heart attack in Calgary is the back seat of a taxi. The reason is there are very good chances it's a foreign qualified doctor. So I am trying to understand from last few years that on one hand, we have a skilled worker shortage, which is, of course, holding the economy. On the other hand, we have a long-standing problem with qualified newcomers being unable to apply their skills. Now, being you here today, please tell me what is being done to ensure that these individuals can have their credentials recognized sooner. And I also understand that regulatory bodies are involved in this matter. So has your department reached out to those regulatory bodies?
Yes, very robustly. Thank you, Mr. Shorey, for your question and your commitment to this issue. I agree entirely. In every opportunity, I underscore how outrageous it is that we have been admitting over 250,000 permanent residents per year, and yet 13% of new immigrants, those who've been in Canada for less than a decade, are unemployed. And of course, many, many more are underemployed. And how this makes precisely no sense in the context of an economy with growing skill and labor shortages, and therefore how we must do a radically better job of facilitating the recognition of credentials of foreign trained professionals and tradesmen. And that is why, Mr. Shorey, in 2006, our government created the Foreign Credential Referral Office. Originally that was at HRSDC and then moved to Citizenship and Immigration Canada, which, amongst other things, funded the availability of pre-arrival orientation sessions for selected economic immigrants before they leave their countries of origin. After they've been selected and while they're wrapping up their affairs at home, they can now get free 2-day seminars and personalized counseling, which focuses on how to find a job in Canada and begin the credential recognition process, perhaps online, before they even get to the country, to give them a head start. It can also advise them on in which provinces it's easier to get and where they can more quickly obtain licensure in their profession. Secondly, both the FCRO at Immigration Canada and the Foreign Credential Recognition Program at my ministry fund millions of dollars of grants and contributions every year to organizations, including licensing bodies, to do the detailed work of streamlining assessment exams and in one big project called the Pan-Canadian Framework for the Assessment of Foreign Qualifications and Credentials, we've invested in the range of $50 million working with the provinces and their respective self-governing professional licensing bodies to streamline and accelerate the process of credential recognition across the country as much as possible, coming up with common standards from coast to coast. This is not easy, simple work. It is very difficult, granular work that is being done. I do believe we are making progress, but at the end of the day, Mr. Shorey, as you well know, we, the federal government, have no direct relationship with the licensing bodies. They are creatures of the provinces, and that is why, at my recent meeting with provincial counterparts, I called on them yet again for renewed political commitment to removing unnecessary barriers to credential recognition and licensure for immigrants. And frankly, let me be blunt, to putting more pressure on those licensing bodies which continue to engage in old-school labor protectionism that see immigrant professionals perhaps as some kind of a threat. As I always say, Mr. Shorey, we don't want to, and nor do immigrants expect us to, lower the Canadian standard. What they expect is at least an answer in a reasonable amount of time, so that if the answer is no, they can go and take additional education or perhaps move on to Plan B. Last point, we have all sorts of other programs, including one that I'm most proud of, started out of our city of Calgary, the Alberta Immigrant Access Fund. We've now helped to make this a kind of a national approach to providing microcredit of up to $10,000 delivered through nonprofits who work out relationships with financial institutions to provide bridge financing for foreign-trained professionals so they can take additional education, pay for their certification exams, and actually get a basic income while they're going back to school so they can reach the Canadian standard. All of these small things together, I think, are having a cumulative effect.
Thank you. Time goes fast. Time goes fast, Mr. Shorey. We know this.
That's it, Cook.
We know this happens frequently. On to Monsieur Tremblay from the opposition.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kenny, for being here with us today to answer our questions. I'd like to go back to something that was said by a witness, Mr. François Massy, on September 19th here. He stated that with the employment insurance program, decision was taken quite independent from the 51 billion that was already there. The contribution rates would have to be set without taking that 51 billion into consideration. Some years ago, we put in place a framework for determining the level of contributions that had to be paid, and on a cyclical basis. We didn't want to recalculate every year, but over the course of several years, some years, the government wanted, with partnership, to ensure that there was a balance. That doesn't mean that the government wouldn't increase the contributions, but in a difficult period that we have just gone through, the contributions have been frozen for the next 3 years. That was very well received by employers and it's a job creation tool. Would you agree that this has had an impact on EI reform? There have been changes in certain regions and in certain economies. Are you going to mitigate the certain pilot projects, or are you going to perhaps reinstate pilot projects in certain regions that are going through particularly difficult times? Well, let me say that employment insurance includes measures that are specific to high unemployment regions. There is a level of benefits that is more generous for these hard-hit regions. Fewer weeks of work for those regions than, say, for an area like mine in Alberta. We are very aware of the differences that exist in the regional job market throughout the country. I note that despite that reality, there are many things that have disappeared and that have been just transitory measures and have disappeared on the regional level. They've disappeared now. I know that there was EI reform, that the regulations have changed, but the refusal, the denial rate for applications retroactively, not only for the following year. I don't know if that's got anything to do with the quotas or if it is perhaps the public servants who are doing that. If they are no longer authorized to do this, but retroactively, there's the figure of $45,000. I don't really understand what you're talking about, sir. Perhaps Karen, you could answer?
Understand the problem that you're talking about either. We are not seeing any large jumps in trends toward denying benefits. It is playing more or less quite steady at around, well, sort of those who are paying into the program and are entitled to benefits. About 80 to 85% of people are, when they are coming to file for claim, are indeed deemed eligible and receiving benefits, and that hasn't changed an awful lot over time at all.
Dans quel cas ils peuvent reculer de façon...
In what case can they collect retroactively to claim amounts? We do make efforts to go back in time retroactively if the claimant received the benefits fraudulently. It's not just to identify the person. If, in fact, the person who made an application did not do so, but did so fraudulently, rather, am I right?
5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Minister. It's great to see you here today. Minister, I was a former chair of the Standing Committee of Aboriginal Affairs and also spent much of my youth in the Northern Canada. And I've always had an interest in engaging Aboriginal youth in attaining jobs and attaining their independence. And I was glad to see our budget 2013 had $241 million over 5 years to provide skills training to youth on reserve. And could you just explain a little bit about the main features of the new First Nations Job Fund and who's eligible and how that's rolling out? And also maybe just touch on a little bit on how the department is kind of interacting with INAC on the rollout.
Well, thank you very much. You've identified, Mr. Mays, what I think is perhaps the single most important thing we could do, given that we all know our greatest social problems sadly tend to be experienced disproportionately by our Aboriginal people, and recognizing that much of the economic development occurring in our country is in Aboriginal parts of the country. And many of those companies are facing skills shortages. Anything we can do to prepare young Canadian Aboriginals in particular for those jobs, I think, solves many problems at once. Skills shortages helps facilitate growth and, of course, helps those young Aboriginal Canadians realize their potential, which is why we are investing very significantly in Aboriginal skills development, particularly through the First Nations Job Fund Youth program, which is, as you've identified, committing $241 million to connect First Nations youth between the ages of 18 and 24 with skills training and jobs. We do this in collaboration with First Nations organizations and in various regions of the country. We try to get feedback from them. What are their priorities? We encourage them to approach us in partnership with employers as much as possible, because we want to see a private sector commitment to that job training. You know what? Let me be blunt. We are not going to succeed in getting unemployed young Aboriginals in the workforce in significant numbers without a real hard money commitment from the private sector. This is a larger message I've been sending, by the way, to the private sector, which I hope my friends from the NDP would applaud. I have said that Canadian governments spend more than virtually any other governments in the developed world on skills development and job training. but the Canadian private sector, according to the OECD, is at the bottom end of the developed world in skills development and job training. And another point, as to Mr. Cuzner's reference to some of the aggregate labour market information, I'm very concerned that we keep hearing complaints from today, John Manley at the Council of Chief Executives, and last week the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and all those organizations about skill shortages, and yet the aggregate labour market information tells us that wage levels on an aggregate basis have barely been keeping pace with inflation. I've said bluntly and publicly to employers that if they want a solution to the problem of skills, the skills mismatch, they have two big market levers at their disposal. One is a greater investment in training that should focus on underrepresented groups in the labour force like Aboriginals, and another is wage levels. And I said that in Vancouver, Ms. Sins, and the only person who applauded me was Jim Sinclair from the BC Federation of Labour. So I'm pleased to be on side. There you are. I'm pleased to be on side with the Brotherhood.
I'm worried about that.
I want to say that really the private sector, the mining companies, the extractive industries that typically operate in northern and Aboriginal areas, they need to come to the, and we're seeing more and more of that collaboration. It's very exciting. But let's be honest. There have been decades of experience with many of these programs that have failed. And I think we have to study those that have succeeded, and really the private sector commitment is key to that. Because we don't want to just fund a cycle of supporting organizations that just take money for training for the sake of keeping their organizations afloat. That's not what this is about. We've actually got to get the employers committing to hire these people. And there are some great examples. Cameco, the uranium miner in northern Saskatchewan, approximately 50% of their workforce is Aboriginal. So all those other extractive companies, and they are making efforts, to their credit. I was just in Saskatchewan on the weekend, and I was told by the Saskatchewan College of Apprenticeships that the number of young Aboriginals registered for apprenticeship programs in that province is almost equivalent to the percentage of Aboriginals in the Saskatchewan population. So there's some real signs of optimism.
Thank you very much. That concludes that round. On to Madam Sims.
Thank you, Minister, and I'm glad you mentioned your speech in Vancouver, because I was told about your speech and had a conversation about it with Mr. Sinclair as well. And we were just, I can tell you, I am just so delighted, and we were so pleased to hear you say the obvious, and that is that companies, organizations have a role to play in training their workers. And also, you mentioned the OECD report, and I was reading the same report, and it was quite a shocker to me that the private sector in Canada is so near it is at the bottom for reinvesting in training and skill development of its workforce. So I think that's obviously things we need to address, and also the wages, the salaries. And I've talked to some employers too, Minister, because, I feel that I need to really get in and hear what the concerns are. And when you actually start discussing with them what they're paying for some of those jobs and the area that the jobs are being offered in, I want to say to them, would you be able to make a living off this? And then you have to wonder why people are not applying. Though I really want to go and talk about good quality childcare. I know it's something that's really close to your heart, Minister. And this area, when we think of our children and our future, and quality childcare has social, economic and health benefits for children and the parents. But I would say it has a greater impact on our overall economy, and that the economic gains cannot be underestimated, and there is proven evidence that a quality childcare program actually gives the economy a boost, not only in the jobs it creates, but also in the way that you have fewer people who will take time off because their children are sick, people are more comfortable at work, they are not stressed out being worried about their children, more people are able to re-enter the workforce because they can find quality daycare. Yet government spending on early learning and childcare in Canada falls far short of that in other OECD countries. So I'm glad we mentioned the OECD earlier as well. Is it within your upcoming plans to work with the provinces and territories to make childcare a priority?
Well, I would say we've already done that through our actions, which matter more than words. And in fact, our government spends $6.5 billion per year on various programs to assist with childhood development, early childhood development, and childcare, including, of course, the universal child care benefit, the tax measures such as the child care expense deduction and the child tax credit, as well, of course, we have a number of other programs that alleviate families with children in poverty, which is one of the reasons we're very proud to see the number of children living in poverty down quite significantly over the past several years. And so I think we are making progress in this respect.
Minister, I just want to pursue that a little bit. When you look at the economic gains of investing in a national childcare program, and proven gains, because we can learn from other countries in Europe on this as well, it seems to me that when we're looking at lifting people out of poverty, one of the key elements that has been pointed out by recent research is that one of the key indicators for lifting people out of poverty is also a quality childcare program, because it makes it possible for people to go out to work. They pay taxes. It sort of feeds into the system. So I know that you have listed off a list of things, but I'm really going to urge you, Minister, because I know how open-minded you are, that you will, pursue this a little bit more, looking at a national program. Now, Minister, I have one more question, and that's really, it's something that niggles at you, when you lie in bed at night, and it's the Canada Job Grant, and because it doesn't seem to address the problem it claims to solve. How will it solve the coming labour shortage, given that it is only for short-term training for up to a year, I've heard recently in the media, while projected shortages are in occupations that require multiple years of schooling and/or training?
Well, I'm delighted to hear the job grant's keeping you up at night, Ms. Sims.
Mr. Kenny, I can tell you, I was getting ready.
Very, very quick answer, please.
The answer is it will not solve the skills gap problem. It is, we believe, one small but important effort at a much broader series of remedies that are needed to solve that problem. And one sentence. Why don't we try something different for once? Why don't we actually try engaging employers and identifying the folks who have the aptitude to work, identifying the incremental training they'll receive with a guaranteed job at the end of it? In a sense, this is a simplified version of what works in parts of Western Europe, which have much lower levels of youth unemployment and much more efficient labour markets.
Thank you very much. On to the last questioner and the first hour, and that's Mrs. McLeod.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. And I'm going to start by, I just want to make a brief comment. I appreciated the thoughts in terms of how the homelessness partnering strategy required some consultation. It required some opportunities to get it going and flowing. And I have to say, I see the results in the community in the riding that I represent, Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou. There's now actually a transfer, and there's a group that are very nimble and agile and are very excellent at being strategic about what gets funded, how it gets funded. And so I guess my question, I mean, I hear regularly from the opposition, there's calls for a national strategy on this and a national strategy on that. And to be frank, I love the word homelessness partnering strategy, because what you're doing is we're supporting the people that know how to create the solutions in the community. So I perhaps would just, it's a general comment, but if you could talk a little bit more in terms of the model and why it's been developed in the way it has.
Whenever, I have to admit, whenever I hear the national strategy for X, Y, or Z, and there's an endless list of, you could fill this room with the proposals for national strategies. When I hear that, actually what I often hear is a national strategy for blank checks, for various other orders of government or organizations. And, you know, often those national strategies, I think, are essentially an expression of classic, what economists would call rent-seeking behavior. I believe in, as you've just intimated, in the principle of subsidiarity. I believe that those orders of government, those organs of civil society that are closer to real people and their lives on the ground are much more effective and efficient at solving social problems than the office towers in Ottawa. And that's why I think national, you know, as a general philosophical statement, I think all of this talk about national strategies misses the point. It's the folks in Kamloops who know that they have a particular population with particular needs with respect to homelessness who are going to be far more effective. And if we can be there to support them through things like the homelessness partnership strategy, I know we'll get better results.
Okay, thank you. And my next sort of focus, and I have this conversation fairly regularly when I meet with some of the students from universities in terms of how we support university program students. And as I start to go through the list, you look at sort of the transfers of the provinces, you look at the income tax write-offs that are available, you look at things like the Canada, you know, the research grants, and a whole host of ways that the federal government supports students. And then we get into the conversation around the student loans. And again, it completely puzzles me because I certainly, you know, there's a number of people who are able to support their children through university. And why students would advocate for support for everyone when really, if you need to focus your resources, you need to focus them on the students that are perhaps most in need. So I note that there's some, in Sup Bs, there's some 1.3 to offset some Canada student loans. But if you could talk a little bit about the student loan program, and of course it's a little bit more targeted, and again to me philosophically is, you know, why should the taxpayers help my children go to university when there's perhaps people that could use the support in a better way?
Well, that's a very broad question. I would just say your last point is quite right. I mean, when I hear some interest groups, I won't mention names, Canadian Federation of Students, suggesting that there basically be, quotes, free post-secondary education. Of course it's not free. It's money that's taxed from people, taxed from wealth creators, taxed from small business people. We're already working 7 days a week to keep their head above water. And you know, the data on this is clear and irrefutable, that those kinds of transfers, while important, while we, of course, have to support post-secondary education, those kinds of transfers do represent an upward transfer of income in our society. Often from working families, let's call them blue-collar families, families of modest means, to families higher up the income spectrum. So I think we have to, and I wish the NDP would join us on this, I think we have to be very careful about we have to look at post-secondary education policy through a social equity lens. And that's why our government, by the way, created the post-secondary education savings plan and puts a grant into those accounts for low-income families. They may not have the capacity to save themselves, but we're going to help to prime the pump so that when their kids turn 18, they've got a few $1,000s in the account, and then the dream of university becomes a reality for them. That's the kind of thing I think we're doing right now in federal post-secondary education policy.
Thank you very much. That concludes the first hour of our meeting. Before we break, I'd like to, on behalf of the committee, thank you, Minister, for being here, for taking time out of your schedule to deal with the questions you have. I can say also, just observing the dialogue that's gone on here today, you never fail to show people how passionate you are about whatever task you undertake, and we thank you for that, and we thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for being here.
Back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take a short break while we bring the second group on. reconvene and welcome some new departmental officials to our witness table. But before doing that, I just would like to remind committee members that in the second hour, these are the senior officials appearing from the Department of Employment and Social Development. And I would like to remind members of the committee at this point that our officials have come here today prepared to answer questions with respect to supplementary estimates. I ask members to try to keep their questions on that topic. So we'd like to welcome Paul Thompson, the Assistant Deputy Minister, Processing and Payment Services Branch, has joined the panel. We'd like to as well welcome Frank Vermaeten, I hope I got that right, sir, who is the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Skills and Employment Branch, and Jacques Paquette, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Income Security and Social Development Branch. Welcome all. The other ones are staying that were here, and I believe you have some remarks. I'm not sure who's going to be. No remarks from any of the officials. Okay, very good. So we'll embark on questioning from members of the committee. Again, please stay on topic of supplemental estimates, if you would. And Madame Gruget, you're first.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chairman. My question will deal with the votes that are the supplementary funds that are being given to the Enabling Accessibility Fund. I'd like to know how the assessment was made. The budget was increased, and why was it increased? How did you do the assessment for this need? Thank you for the question. The budget was not increased, but the program was renewed. This is a program that was set up in 2008 at $15 million a year over 3 years, and it's being renewed. In the last budget, what the government did was to renew the program on a longer basis, and it is therefore like the equivalent of a new program. The total amount of the program for this year is what you find in Subs B. So the amounts that have been provided are the same. They're going to be reused. Is that for different purposes? Yes. With respect now to the use of these funds by the provinces, first, do you have an idea, or is there a breakdown by province of the funding? And do you have an idea about the way in which those funds on a per province basis were used? Were there provinces that underuse the funding available? Or with respect to other provinces, if you compare them, give me an idea about what happens. Well, I'll say two things. First of all, the fund is administered nationally. There's no provincial allotment. There are proposals that are made on certain themes, and once the proposals are received, they are analyzed, and then the funds are allocated on the basis of the best project. Yes, but have you noted that you say it's national? Have you noted then that there are some submissions that are made by certain provinces, more in some provinces, fewer in others? And if so, which are they? I don't have these details here because we're talking about a lot of projects. Over the past 3 years, for example, it's more than 700 projects that were approved. Okay. It depends very much on the nature of the proposals. It can vary. What we have noted was that in Ontario there were fewer, and because of the Disability and Accessibility Act, I would say that there was more awareness on the part of varying agencies, and so in an instance there were more projects submitted. Chairman, can I have these documents? Would it be possible for me to have a copy of the documents to peruse them? Yes, you can find them on the department. Oh, yes, they can be found, rather, on the website of the department. All right, that's right, I'll do that. Concerning these funds, will they continue to target projects that are small and medium-sized, as has been the case in the past? Yes, we have added a new element, which is this. There will be access to the workplace. That is added. It takes nothing away from the other dimensions, but it is added to it. That there will be a call for proposals that will particularly target small business with a view to increasing these small businesses' ability to hire persons with disabilities. Well, right now, unfortunately, some don't have access to make applications on the site. Is that normal? Well, the way it works is this. People set dates, and on the website you can access you can make a request, if you like, to present a proposal. The reason why there's nothing on the site is that it is now closed. The proposal period has been closed, and there will be other proposals that will be prepared.
Mr. Daniel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here. And I'm just going to take the same kind of line in terms of in terms of disabilities. Our government has shown time and time and again that it cares greatly about the livelihoods of Canadians, and I was hoping that one of the department officials could update the committee on what the federal government and the Department of Employment and Social Development is doing for Canadians with disabilities. We've heard previously on the committee that people with disabilities are seriously disadvantaged when it comes to employment. Perhaps somebody can make a comment on that.
Sure. Okay, so I would say that there are several elements that the department is doing. So, and in the SAPs you will find some of these initiatives. So the first one is, of course, the Enabling Accessibility Fund that was renewed on an ongoing basis. Before it was limited, now it's on an ongoing basis, and that's 15 million per year, and that's really to increase the accessibility of buildings for people with disabilities. There's also in the SAPs we have also the announcement of the creation of a form for employers, and that's a result of the recommendation of the panel that worked on the people with disability in the labor market. And here, what the idea behind this is that you what was realized is that there's a lot of I would say willingness on the part of the employers to hire more people with disabilities, but they needed to get a little bit better tools, in fact, and share best practices among themselves. So this is what the forum will do, is that will bring employers together and work together to be able to increase their capacity to integrate people with disabilities. Other elements, we have other programs within the department, like the social development partnership program that has a component on disability that helps our organizations to support the integration of people with disabilities. And there's a series of programs that are specifically related to the integration of people with disabilities in the labor market.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add, Chair, that I met recently with my provincial counterparts of Deputy Ministers of Social Services, and we had visiting us and speaking to us the panel members from the panel that the Minister referred to earlier. One of the members of that panel, Mark Wafer, was describing his extensive visits across the country with colleagues in business. He will go and meet and talk with just about any business or other group that invites him. And his analysis was that the continuing disadvantage or blockage, if you like, to the increased take-up of persons with disabilities in business is the continuing mythology and fear about the costs to the business of recruiting persons with disabilities of all kinds. And he has made the case extensively, and that's what the panel is that the forum is intended to facilitate, about the kind of productivity increases to businesses from the employers that the employees that they recruit, and the improvements, the advantages to the brand of the business and the potential for engagement with customers when they see behind the counter or on the floor individuals working for the company who have been recruited, notwithstanding their disabilities. It was a very impressive presentation, and that's the kind of advances that we need to see in the marketplace.
Just to follow up on that, that sounds great for all the younger folks, but obviously we have an aging community with more and more older folks getting disabled. Any programs or support for those sorts of activities to support the seniors in our communities with disabilities?
Yeah, I can say a few things. Of course, programs like the Enabling Accessibility Fund can apply. I mean, it's to make these buildings accessible, so that would also benefit to seniors. And I would say that the other programs that look after seniors, like the New Horizons for Seniors program, what we look here is different elements, but one of them is to support seniors to avoid isolation, for example, and to make sure that they are supported in order to remain committed and involved in their communities, for example, and so on. So that's a way to make sure that the community keeps in touch with the seniors, and vice versa, seniors continue to contribute to their communities.
Thank you for that. Move on to Mr. Kuzner for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. Appreciate everybody being here today. I'd like to get a question in on the Social Security Tribunal appeal. Who's best to handle that? Okay. Oh, both? Okay. Yeah. Just in light of the fact that most claimants are self-represented, this may seem like a trivial point, but this is right out of the constituency office, a couple of files. Most claimants are self-represented. In the decisions that are rendered by the tribunal, it doesn't include any mention of appeals rights. All it is, they refer you to the tribunal website. I guess the question is that by design or is that an oversight? Do you see a shortcoming? And just in the fact that most are self-represented, that it would be of benefit to maybe to have more information there in the rendering of those decisions. Just your comments.
We can certainly take that suggestion on. We've implemented a new reconsideration phase, as you may know, within EI, where we do that initial review. We give the client the result of that review, and we can certainly undertake to look at the quality of the instructions around the next steps in the appeal process to the SST.
I think that there's some that are very much intimidated by the process now, or are concerned, I guess, about the process now, and I would think that would be a worthwhile undertaking. Youth unemployment obviously remains a major concern, with the youth unemployment rate up over 13%. When we look at there are about 50,000 fewer youth jobs now than 8 years ago. We look at the YES program, and the funding in the YES program 8 years ago it was funding 115 to 118,000 young people each year, and it's down. Last year was about 60,000. What are we looking at this year? The number that would benefit from that program, and if you could sort of share with me why it's been heading in this direction, and is there what can we do to reverse the trend?
Well, certainly,
the funding's the same, I think, isn't it?
The funding's the same. There's been a mix of supports. There's been certainly changes over time, and so the youth employment strategy is around $300 million a year. But the government certainly invested in youth. For example, they've announced in the Economic Action Plan $70 million for career focus, which is part of the youth employment strategy. So to provide internships for youth, and that's certainly an important part. There's been other supports that have been out there, such as the labour market agreements, which the government introduced, which increase the amount of funding that's going to youth. So there's a whole range of programming out there, and the youth employment strategy is certainly an important one.
But with the transfers, would they be hived off? Would they be identified in the transfers to the provinces, particularly for youth?
They're not. The labour market agreements and the labour market development agreements are there for multiple purposes, and certainly they're a big part of the supports we provide for provinces to help youth enter into the labour markets.
So there is a fear then, when we're looking at the, the clawback of the money with the LMAs, then it may jeopardize in some provinces any further investment or continued investment in youth programming. That potential exists.
Well, in fact, the funding for the labour market agreements aren't decreasing. They're going to continue to be $500 million. Just the question is, what are the tools that the provinces and territories are going to use to support youth and to support the labour market? So in the case of the Canada Job Grant here, the goal is to try to make the labour market agreements more effective by getting employers involved in helping youth and others transition into the workforce as fast as possible.
Yeah, but you say the funding is remaining the same, but now the funding is being specified for the job grant from the LMA.
Yeah, the funding is going to be specified for the job grant. The purpose, though, is to make the funding more effective.
I think as well, Chair, there's no single program other than the youth employment strategy that is specifically targeted at youth, although discussing earlier the First Nations Job Fund, just the demographics of that, it is targeted at 18 to 24-year-old Aboriginals on reserve, so that's another piece of the jigsaw puzzle. The SUPS-B do contain an additional $70 million in that career focus component of the youth employment strategy, so that is additional. One of the key concerns is that first attachment to the labour market on the part of young people, and that's what drove that additional investment. And then the other component is the skills link stream of the youth employment strategy with I believe, consistent funding, stable funding, which is, as you know, directed to youth who face particular barriers in coming into the job market.
That's the end of the time. You're way over, Mr. Kuzner. On to Monsieur Bouleris.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you to our witnesses. You're quite numerous, so I say welcome to you all. You are people who can give us relevant information. I still have questions on the strategy dealing with homelessness. I'll come back to the departmental report with respect to 2012-2013's performance. It said that the strategy underused approximately 10% of the funds that were to be invested in projects to help people, to help the homeless. That represented some $13 million, $12.8 million that were not allotted, that were not used. What should you do to prevent this from happening again? I know that there are organizations in Montreal who too often have seen their projects just come to naught because of and what has happened for them is that they can't go backwards. They can't in time. They can't pay the people, though, that have been working for them for 6 months, say. So these people are saying to me that there's a crying need in the streets. We don't have enough grants. We need to have the tools to deal with that, and then you have the money that's unspent. So what explains the fact that in 2012-13 there was money that was left unspent? What can you do to rectify this situation? I would say that the first thing is this. Those funds that were not spent last year will not disappear. They will be there for this year. The second thing is that the minister has outlined some reasons why we have these difficulties, but the main reason why is that they were, and it's not unique to this program. It is because there was infrastructure projects that were lacking. That meant they weren't ready, and therefore there were delays in terms of the projects that sometimes were beyond the control of the persons who issued the funding for the programs. The infrastructure has to be in place, and the funds are still there to finalize the infrastructure projects that have taken some time to be developed. And that is the principal reason. The funds that are in Sup B today, the majority of these funds are related to infrastructure programs, or rather projects that were not finished on time. So if I understand, $12.8 million was not allotted in 2012-2013, but in Subs B, you are acting for 13.3 million more. Am I to understand that a part of the 13.3 million is the 12.8 that wasn't dealt with, or are we looking at another 13.3 million? What wasn't used, is it still there? In Subs B, when you reprofile the monies, it's not new funds. These are unspent funds that will be spent this year. So there's only $500,000 more or less that is the part of the $13.1 million. It's not the same thing, you're telling me. Maybe I could shed some light on this. In real time, the funds time ran out. So the expenditures for 2012-2013, the expenditures represented $16.3 million. That was the amount at the end of the year. $13 million was reprofiled in the Subs B that you're looking at today. Another $3 million for 2014-2015. So those monies that were not used have been reprofiled and are moved towards the coming year, this year and next year. Thank you.
Would you like to end?
I can't do anything in 10 seconds.
On to Mr. Butt.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank all of you for being here today. My questions will be focusing on the housing side of the department as well. So let's just do a little follow-up on the homelessness partnering strategy. In my previous life, I was directly involved with a program in Toronto known as Streets to Homes, which was funded through the HPS program. So maybe you can, somebody can explain a little bit more. Give us some examples of the types of programs that we are funding through HPS. As I understand it, it's direct federal to municipal government funding. I think we bypass the provinces. We actually directly provide money on the ground in communities for direct homelessness prevention work, which I think is tremendous. I think that's exactly what we should be doing, getting money directly on the ground in communities that's making a difference. So other than the Streets to Homes program that I'm familiar with in the City of Toronto, can you give me some other examples of the kinds of programming that HPS is funding?
Yes, and I should add that there's one exception, is that for the with Quebec, there's a joint agreement with the province of Quebec for the implementation. But otherwise, you're right. This is really a community-based approach, and as the minister said so well, is that people on the ground know better about the type of solution that should be brought forward. So what we are doing essentially is that we are asking the community, so literally the major urban centers across the country where there are homeless issues, to develop a community plan. And the community plan has major advantages. The first one, of course, is that they're looking at the overall issue, how they are going to address it. Second thing is that they bring together around the table all the key players. That includes municipalities, non-for-profit, for-profit as well, provincial and so on, provincial authorities, so they can, in fact, coordinate and integrate their services to address the issue on the ground. So what we do at the federal government is that we look at the plan, we look at the priorities that they're putting forward, and then we provide them the funds, and they're the one who then will select the right projects to implement that. And that will vary from one city to the other, depending on the nature of the problem they're facing, also depending of the I would say the type of services that are already in place and so on. So it can vary a lot. I mean, in some cases we were talking about capital projects, for example. One way of using the HPS money, for example, is to refit some of the apartments to make them available for permanent housing for some of the homeless people that we're trying to get out of the street. In other cases, is to provide also some kind of services. I'm thinking of social services because, as you know, people that are in the street are facing a multitude very often of problems that you need to address. So you need people to be able to do that, and that's where you can get the right people to do that. So that's type of the projects that could be funded through HPS. And at the end of the day, what we're really looking forward is to look at the results where there will be a reduction of the number of people that are homeless across the country.
Economic Action Plan 2013 announced, the Minister of Finance announced a 5-year renewal of HPS, as well as a 5-year renewal of the Affordable Housing Initiative. Where are we on the status of our negotiations, our discussions with our provincial partners? Because this is new funding effective April 1 of next year. Where are we now in our discussions with the provinces around the renewal of the Affordable Housing Initiative and signing those agreements? Because I do know that the agreements are slightly different given different provinces, and different provinces have different affordable housing needs. You can't compare PEI with downtown Toronto, and you can't compare Toronto with the Yukon. So when we're negotiating these agreements, we know we have to have flexibility. We know we have to have a sense of reality of what the housing needs and situations are in different parts of the country. So can you just give me a quick update? I'm sure that'll be the end of my time. Just where we are on the renewal of those agreements, considering the fact they'll be effective April 1, 2014?
We're already over time, Mr. Butt, so if I might ask, someone might address that at a future question, perhaps from the government side. You could do it that way, but you were actually over time, Mr. Butt, so we'll move on to Madam Sims.
Thank you very much. You know, we're hearing a lot about the skills shortage and also the government having a priority about skills training. But when I looked at the figures from public accounts, the government sat on over $138 million that had been approved to support skills and job creation, rather than transferring that money to organizations, cities, Aboriginal bands, and post-secondary institutions. All, by the way, could have used those funds to support skills training, essential skills, literacy, and job experience. 11% of the funds were earmarked for apprenticeships. 20% of the budget the government had for grants to diverse organizations, including private sector and industry groups, to support the competitiveness of Canadian workplace through skills training. All of that money just did not get spent. So I'm wondering if you can comment on these training investments and why they did not take place.
Go ahead and take that.
So I suspect you're referring to the lapse of funds in some of these programs. I can't speak to all the details and permutations. There are many programs, but many will be reprofiled. One example is you talked about skills, so I've got to make sure I got the right one here. Apprenticeship grants. No, that one is not. Labor market agreements. Profiled. We have reprofiled many of these. For example, the labor market agreements at $24.7 million. There was of course, the youth employment strategy is not one of those. I'd have to look at the various programs that we have, but many are reprofiled into future years. I'm just looking here.
So, I realize that maybe you could get back to us with that, through the clerk, and that way we can all have that information. Because one of the things is, and when you say reprofiled, are you saying the money is moved forward into this year?
That's right.
Is that in addition to the money that would have been allocated this year?
Yes.
So that it's an added amount?
Yes. It could also be moved into future years as well.
Yeah.
We've got a few programs that have.
Well, thank you for that clarification. But one of the big concerns I have is when I've met with some of the post-secondary institutions that are looking at training, is that they are very concerned about the additional resources they need, and yet we had resources that didn't get used. The other question I have is based on a comment made by Michael Mendelson, who's a public policy specialist at the Calden Institute, and he suggested that Ottawa lacks the capacity to administer $900 million a year in training funds, with the oversight such an endeavour would require. And he referenced some things in Europe as well. He went on to suggest that as it's planned, the Canada Job Grant is risky and has the potential for a good deal of abuse and fraud. I have to admit, I share a similar concern.
Point of order.
Can you comment on that?
Point of order.
What does this got to do with SUBSP? As far as I know, the Canada Jobs Grant's not part of the SUBSP.
I'm going to allow some latitude, but allow you to get to the point. You have about a minute left. Get to the point, please.
Really, basically, I want to say what checks and balances are going to be put in place to ensure that the money is used in the way it is intended.
I would just reply very briefly, Chair, that before the department spent any money on any program, we make very sure that the appropriate accountability and performance measurement regime is in place. But I would just refer to the Minister's comments that the government fervently hopes to reach agreements with the provinces so that the Canada Job Grant becomes part of their delivery. That's the government's objective.
Thank you for that response. I'm going to excuse myself from the chair now, members, just so you know, and it ties in nicely to today's discussion, some parts of the discussion, because I need to get to the House of Commons for the tabling of my motion, which is entitled Strengthening Employment for Canadians with Disabilities. So I'm going to excuse myself to go to the House, and Madam Sims, as the Vice Chair, is going to take over the balance of the meeting. Should have taken that up.
Yeah, don't take that. Nice tie.
Thank you.
Okay. So who's next? Mr. Armstrong, you're next.
I guess I'm really going to focus on sub-SPE now. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Madam Chair. Congratulations and welcome to the chair. I think it's the first time you've taken the chair in this committee. We're going to be doing a study after Christmas. We're actually starting this week on the assets program. And I noticed in sub-SPE there's 11.9 million asked for First Nations Jobs Fund for job training. Can you expand a bit on what that's going to be applied to?
Nations Job Fund, Chair, is not the same as the funding for the assets program, but it does it will be distributed, we hope in the vast majority of cases, to what we refer to as assets holders. These are the service providers, about 80 of them across the country, who are the direct service providers for Aboriginal training, skills and employment training in the communities across the country. The First Nations Job Fund is the fund that has been set up in employment and social development, that together with the enhanced service delivery funding that has gone to Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development, work together to identify the most promising communities where current income assistance clients, young people on reserve, will be, instead of income assistance, be receiving supports, pre-employment supports delivered through Aboriginal and Affairs and Northern Development, and employment training funded out of the First Nations Job Fund. So the two really come together between the two departments, and our part of the services are provided through what we refer to as the assets network. The funding, the kind of baseline funding for Aboriginal skills development, is provided through the assets network separately as a separate budget item.
Thank you very much. I do want to give an opportunity for the officials to answer Mr. Butt's questions. He previously finished in the last round. So if anyone...
I would just say that those negotiations with the provinces on the affordable housing agreements are beginning. Our colleague Stephen Mennell from Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation could add detail as you wish.
Sure, thank you. As you may know, we have existing agreements in place with all provinces and territories until March 31st, 2014. The government announced a 5-year extension to that program, and we are in the process currently of negotiating that 5-year extension with all provinces and territories.
Thank you. My last question has to do with the deferral of the OAS recipients. I think in the sub-SPE there's $3.1 million to be applied to the administration of this new program we put in place. Can you expand on why this is so important and give our seniors, our needy seniors, the more flexibility in when they receive their OAS benefit?
Sure. I can answer that. What was put in place, in fact, is something that provides more flexibility to people. So before, of course, OAS was available when you were reaching 65 years old. So the deferral will allow you to, if you choose to do so, to defer it as long as you wish, up to 70 years old. And there's a calculation that is done based on actuarial cost, which means that you will increase, in fact, by 7.2% each year that you defer the amount of your benefit for the rest of your life. So the flexibility that it adds is that if someone decides to keep working, for example, remain in the labor market past 65, they can then decide to just postpone the receipt of OAS without losing any money, because in a way, because of the actual calculation overall, over the period of time, they will receive the same amount without having lost anything. So that's adding a lot of flexibility, and of course it's related to the fact that labor market is evolving with the demographic challenges that society is facing. People are aging, and we know that if people are extending their participation in the labor market, that will also help the entire country in dealing with some of the pressure that we might be facing. So it's to have that flexibility, and it's an additional choice for people.
Thank you. You're out of time. Sorry. And I'm going to go over to Monsieur Boulris and to be shared with Monsieur Tremblay.
You already know that. Merci, Madame.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The question that I wasn't able to ask in 10 seconds earlier, I'm going to ask now. I come back with my hobby horse of the day, the homelessness strategy. You are budgeting 134 million. You're asking for certain sums that were not used before. In the 2013 budget, what is provided for is 119 million per year over 5 years. What impact do you foresee in terms of the success of the homelessness initiative, in view of the fact that you have the 28 million down, the reduction of $28 million in this budget? A great deal of money is being lost, it seems to me, and groups will have fewer resources available to them. These are two different things. You have your base budget, and you have sums of monies that were not spent but will be spent. Also, the program, when it was renewed over 5 years. Before, it was 2 or 3 year renewals, and now the 5 years will ensure stability in planning. We know over 5 years there will be an amount of money that will be allotted, and it can be counted on. And that has good results also in terms of planning, because you can plan activities with the organizations. It will be easier, therefore, to spend the money then over the course of the coming few years. I referred earlier to infrastructure programs. Those are programs that once they are there, once they're completed, it's a lot easier to deal with the amounts that are agreed upon. You have an accumulated amount that is there to be spent, and that will provide a good basis for the continuation of the program. I don't think that there has been a drop. On the contrary, I think you will actually be able to count on more money over the coming years. Well, say I earn $75,000 over 3 years, and if that same $75,000 is over 5 years, I'm earning less per year. Well, just to be clear, we're talking about the renewal. The funding for homelessness, the homelessness strategy does not change. It remains the same. Is that what you seem to be referring to, sir? There are sums there that will be spent, even though I have, say, 83 million. With respect to the transfers of funds to the communities, there will be no difference. It will be the same. There will be a drop in the budgets that will principally be linked to efficiencies outside the department. We have redirected the way in which we are doing things in the hope of doing them better. So over 5 years, costs to the communities will be lessened, as well as costs to us. How much time do I have left?
Start.
Okay. Je vais poser ma question rapidement.
I will try to ask my question quickly. In 2002, it was said that EI, the EI fund was consulted. There has been a separation now. In terms of the EI fund. Is this going to continue, or is there going to be a drawing together of the components in the budget? Have I understood it correctly? Is there something that is you talk about the abolition of the funding office. Are you going to put something in place to mitigate that loss of the office? Thank you for your question.
Correctly, what you're asking is that there was a body put in place to set the rates for the employment insurance account, and the government has announced that that body will no longer be setting the rates, and they'll be now done by the Commission.
Excuse me, sir. I hate to do this, but the 5 minutes are up. But in the next round, I will be going back to Mr. Tremblay to share with Madame Grogoy, and at that time, just hold on to your answer, please. Yeah, because you know, I want to make sure everybody gets their time in a fair way. Okay, the next speaker is Mr. Shorey.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses once again as well. Well, as our previous budgets and actions have shown, ensuring increased participation in our Canadian labour market by members of the First Nations communities is very important to of course, to our government. And Minister Carney, when he was here, he alluded towards the importance of First Nations participation, and that could also be a solution to some skills we are lacking here in Canada. So the question is, what is the Department of Employment and Social Development doing to increase Aboriginal participation in the Canadian labour market? And also, could you update the committee on what the Skills and Partnership Fund will do for Canadians?
Perhaps I could begin, and then Mr. Vermaten could add some detail on the Strategic Partnership Fund. There are three principal programs in the department targeted at improving the employability and developing skills for Aboriginal Canadians. The first is the Assets program, which is I would call it the base programming for Aboriginal communities across the country. Administered, we have agreements with these third-party providers who then work with the communities, training institutions, employers. Frequently, the objective here is to improve the skill levels. It's not always directly tied to employment prospects. There's tremendous diversity across the communities in receipt of these funds, some very remote communities, some in semi-urban or closer to urban centres. The second program that I'd refer to, we were discussing a minute ago, the First Nations Job Fund, which is specifically oriented to younger Aboriginal people on reserve who are in receipt of income assistance. And the objective there is to take those where communities themselves on reserve decide to participate, typically because economic opportunity will have been identified, and so we anticipate a very positive engagement between employers, the two departments engaged in this, and the training institutions to improve skills there. And the third one is the Strategic Partnership Fund, which is deliberately oriented towards private sector training institutions where these are project-driven. There are clear economic opportunities, and we have engaged in some specific calls for proposals from industry to, and Frank, you might just want to add a word or two on those calls for proposals and the results we've had.
Sure. The Skills and Partnership Fund, it's a program that really is a partnership program where we put out a call for proposal, and we're looking for industry to invest in people. And so we put out a call for proposal, and we get various companies, and they tend to be the larger companies, that are interested in taking a group of Aboriginals and giving them a full suite of training, and that they end up with a job at the end of it. So you'll have a project where the government, through the Skills and Partnership Fund, might invest, say, $10 million, while the private sector might invest a similar amount, and other partners join in too, such as the provinces and territories. So together they pool their funding, they bring an individual through a group of individuals through training, on-the-job experiences, and in many cases they do end up with jobs, and we've had tremendous success with this program over the years. And so it's one that's very popular for the industry out there, because they do see it as a way to really have the kind of training, the demand-driven kind of training that helps train the people to suit their needs.
Thank you very much. Your time is up. I know time goes quickly when you're having fun. Mr. Tremblay, I'm back to you for 2 minutes, and then we're going to be having a vote.
The fact that the Employment Insurance Commissioner consulted with the provinces with respect to this will have some significant results with an incidence that seems to be far greater than the reality. Can you do something to mitigate the loss of this funding office?
What I was saying to get a better understanding, to make sure that I'm answering the question properly. So as I was saying, that we had the Canada Employment Insurance Financing Board, which was there when there was a different rate setting mechanism, and the government came along, and what they did was they first limited the rate increase, because the premium rate was set to go up, and what the government said was, we're going to cap that rate at $1.88 for a number of years. So the concern was, if rates would go up, with the economy still not fully recovered, that they didn't want those rates to go up. So they capped those rates. And then the other important thing that they did in the last budget was they set in place a new rate-setting mechanism that would be based on an outlook, a 7-year outlook of the economy. And the idea there is to provide counter-cyclical support, so that you set a rate that's very stable. So even if the economy goes down, the rate wouldn't automatically go up. So instead it remains stable and provides support to the economy. So I think this using the Canada Employment Insurance Commission to set the rate is there now because of the new rate-setting mechanism.
So much, and I want to thank, on behalf of the committee, all of you for giving us your time and your expertise and answering our questions, and we'll look forward to the information that you're going to provide on one of the questions. So once again, thank you. We have a series of votes on the estimates right now. So the Chair moves that we vote 1B. So 1B under Human Resources and Skills Development. All those in favour? Opposed? Carries. Vote B under Human Resources and Skills Development. All those in favour? Opposed? It carries. Okay. Votes on numbers 1B and 5B under Human. Okay. Shall the Chair report votes numbers 1B and 5B under Human Resources and Skills Development to the House? All those in favour? Great. Thank you very much. And just so you all know, we're at 5:29. We managed to do all of those things within the allocated time. So you get early dismissal.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.